The night was supposed to be perfect. Daniel had planned Emily's birthday dinner for weeks, searching for the most romantic rooftop restaurant in the city, string lights, soft jazz, and a skyline painted in gold from the setting sun. He greeted her with a smile that held months of effort behind it, presenting her with a small velvet box containing the necklace he had been saving for paycheck after paycheck. Friends and family sat around the table, clapping and expressing admiration. But Emily barely looked up. Her eyes constantly flickered to her phone, locking and unlocking the screen, thumbs typing in hurried bursts. She barely touched the food, absently pushing her fork back and forth. Everyone thought she was just tired, but Daniel couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. This wasn't how birthdays looked. This just when the servers rolled out the dessert surprise, a glowing cake with candles lined like tiny stars. Emily's phone lit up again. This time something in her froze. Her back straightened, her fingers tightened on the screen, and her eyes widened before she stood abruptly. "I need to take this call," she muttered, already walking away. Gasps and quiet confusion spread around the table as she stepped outside. Minutes turned into 30 into 60, then 2 hours. Her phone switched off, going straight to voicemail. Daniel sat there stiff as stone, watching the candles melt into puddles of wax. The cake leaned, untouched. Servers whispered to each other. Guests exchanged looks of pity and discomfort. Every sound seemed too loud. The clinking glasses, faint music. But nothing was louder than Emily's empty chair at the table. It wasn't how love looked. Not anymore. Emily returned as if nothing had happened. 2 hours later, she walked back into the restaurant with calm steps, her phone tucked away, expression cool and unreadable. No panic, no apology, just a hollow smile that didn't reach her eyes. She slipped into her seat and simply said, "I just needed some air," as if the explanation closed a chapter. The whole table froze, unsure how to react. Even the servers hesitated, unsure whether to resume celebration or retreat. Daniel stared at her, searching her face for regret, fear, anything, but her eyes were empty. He forced a smile, because what else could he do? The candles were gone, the dessert ruined, but the real damage was invisible, lodged in his chest like a blade. That birthday ended without cheers, without laughter, and without answers. Something was deeply wrong, and they both knew it. There was a time when Daniel and Emily were inseparable. Their tiny apartment was filled with late-night cooking sessions, messy movie nights, and dreams whispered under blankets. They laughed at small things, planned big things, vacations, careers, and someday a house full of kids. They used to sit on the floor eating noodles from one bowl because they were broke but happy, and that happiness felt indestructible. But as years passed, something began to shift. Emily became distant, first subtly, then painfully obvious. She started working late more often, blaming deadlines and overtime. She stopped laughing at his jokes, stopped sharing stories from her day. Every time Daniel reached out to pull her closer, she pulled further away. He noticed a change, but love made him blind enough to hope it was temporary. He didn't know how quickly warmth could freeze. Daniel tried everything to fight for the marriage he believed in. He suggested weekend trips, spontaneous dinners, even couples therapy. Anything to light the spark again. But Emily always had excuses. Too busy, too tired, or simply not in the mood. She drifted further, like a ghost sharing space, but not a life. Meanwhile, Daniel's own world was shattering. He had just lost his father, the person he admired most, and he was working overtime to save for a family home he believed would make Emily happy again. Those long nights at work left him exhausted. Yet he still came home with hope in his eyes. But in that home, he felt alone, lonelier than he'd ever felt in his entire life. Emily slept facing away from him, both physically and emotionally. He couldn't reach her anymore. Luckily, Daniel wasn't completely alone. Liam, his best friend since childhood, visited often, making sure Daniel didn't drown in grief and self-blame. Liam felt like the only stable thing in Daniel's collapsing world, bringing food, laughter, and company when no one else did. He became like a brother. Yet even Liam noticed how cold Emily had become. She barely acknowledged Daniel, rolled her eyes when he tried to be affectionate, and treated him like an inconvenience rather than a husband. Daniel kept telling himself that he just wasn't good enough. Maybe he wasn't romantic enough, successful enough, interesting enough. He carried the weight of failure on his shoulders alone. So when Emily vanished during her birthday dinner without an apology or explanation, it wasn't infusion that crushed him. It was recognition. The moment he'd feared had finally arrived. Something was terribly wrong. 2 days after the ruined birthday dinner, the truth began to slip through the cracks by accident. Daniel was folding laundry when his phone rang. The caller ID read Madison, one of Emily's co-workers. He answered, expecting something casual, but Madison's cheerful tone immediately faded when he said Emily wasn't home. Wait, she never came home after the dinner? Madison asked, her voice tightening with concern. Daniel explained how Emily disappeared for 2 hours and returned emotionless, offering no explanation. Silence filled the call, heavy and trembling. Then Madison whispered, almost like she regretted speaking at all. Daniel felt cold all over. He stared at the letter, wishing it meant nothing, wishing it belonged to someone he didn't know. But his heart already whispered the name he feared. Liam, his best friend, his brother in spirit. The man who held him up through grief. The man who sat on his couch laughing like family. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Was Liam the person Emily disappeared to meet on her birthday? Was the only person he fully trusted the one destroying him? In the darkness, while Emily slept peacefully beside him, Daniel silently shattered. Since discovering the secret messages, Daniel began watching everything without letting a single emotion show on his face. Emily had changed, subtly at first, then alarmingly. She started wearing a new perfume he didn't recognize, dressing more boldly for work, and leaving home earlier than she needed to. Nights became longer. Excuses became sharper. She smiled at her phone in ways she no longer smiled at him. And then there was Liam, the sudden extra supportive friend who checked on Daniel too often, asked too many questions, and encouraged him not to overthink things. The more Liam insisted everything was normal, the more abnormal everything felt. Daniel wasn't just heartbroken now. He was terrified of the answer he already knew. Every day felt like a slow, silent countdown. He was living beside two people acting, lying, pretending. While he's still alone in the truth no one would admit. One afternoon, Madison asked Daniel to meet privately, not home, not near work, but in a small cafe 2 towns away. Her hands shook as she slid her phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots Emily had once shared with her, romantic text from a secret man, written during the period Emily claimed she was too stressed for love. Messages full of passion, plans, and risk. Madison whispered, I didn't want to get involved, but you deserve to know. Daniel stared at the screen until the paragraphs blurred. It wasn't suspicion anymore, it was proof. His marriage was being lived with someone else. What killed him most was the contrast. The intimacy Emily denied him was the intimacy she poured into another man. The cafe around him faded. Madison's voice dimmed. All Daniel heard was the echo of his own breaking on the same weekday, and time Emily had disappeared during the birthday dinner. Daniel followed her, quietly, from a distance. She walked fast, dressed beautifully, almost glowing. She reached the parking lot and waited only seconds before a car pulled up. The passenger door opened, and Emily stepped in without hesitation, without doubt, without guilt. Daniel moved closer, eyes locked on the driver, and when he saw the face, his knees nearly gave out. Liam, his best friend, the person he trusted above every other man in his life. Emily touched Liam's hand the way she used to touch Daniel's. They laughed together, the kind of laugh Daniel hadn't heard from her in years. The car pulled away, leaving Daniel frozen on the pavement, numb and shaking. In that moment, his world didn't just hurt, it collapsed. Both the woman he loved and the friend he trusted had chosen each other over him. Daniel didn't want screaming. He didn't want violence. He wanted the truth recorded and preserved, not for revenge, but for freedom. He invited Emily and Liam to a quiet dinner home, explaining it as closure and a way to clear the air. Neither suspected a thing. Emily walked in casual and confident. Liam appeared tense but hopeful that the night would resolve the guilt choking him. When they sat, Daniel didn't speak. He simply picked up the remote and pressed play. The TV displayed security footage from the hotel lobby. the very night Emily vanished during her birthday dinner. There she was on screen, walking in with Liam, kissing him before taking the elevator up. Emily froze. Liam's forehead glistened with sweat. Daniel didn't yell. He sat motionless at the table, tears silently falling, forcing him to confront what they had tried to hide. Silence suffocated the room until Liam finally broke. Voice trembling, he confessed everything: the affair, the hotel, the weekly meetings. He thought Emily would finally admit the truth now that they were exposed. But instead, Emily's mask hardened, and she delivered a plot twist that shattered every expectation. She denied everything. She twisted the situation skillfully, calmly, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. She claimed Liam had been obsessed with her, had pressured her, and she went to a hotel only to tell him to stop. She painted Daniel as paranoid, insecure, emotionally unstable, the reason she hadn't told him sooner. Liam stared at her in complete disbelief, mouth open, unable to process the betrayal from the woman he risked everything for. In seconds, she switched from exposed cheater to victim, manipulating the moment with chilling precision. The room exploded. Emily screamed, accusing Liam of stalking her. Liam yelled back, furious that she was sacrificing him to save herself. Daniel wanted to shout to make it stop, but he was already gone inside, broken past the point of reaction. The moment Emily realized her manipulation wasn't working, she snapped and said the quiet part out loud. "I was leaving you anyway." The words echoed like a gunshot. In a blind rage, Liam revealed the real plan. Emily was going to divorce Daniel after draining him financially to fund a business she and Liam were planning to start together. She never planned to stay with either of them. Emily's face twisted with fury at being exposed. Daniel collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, not because of betrayal, but because he finally knew it was real. The truth wasn't a wound anymore. It was an explosion. The morning after the confrontation, Daniel didn't scream, beg, or argue. He walked into his lawyer's office with the security footage, messages, financial logs, and a recorded confession. Within 48 hours, joint accounts were frozen. Emily's access to his income stopped, and divorce papers were filed with grounds solid enough to make the case undeniable. Emily panicked, not because she lost a husband, but because she lost control. She tried apologizing, crying, promising therapy, promising change, but Daniel didn't waver. She tried blaming Liam, then tried seducing Daniel, then screaming that he'd ruined her life. None of it worked. The law forced her to move out of their house. For the first time, Emily felt what Daniel had felt for months: emptiness, loneliness, fear. And when she reached out to Liam for comfort, he didn't answer. He blocked her. The empire she built on betrayal collapsed in silence. Daniel didn't heal overnight, but he healed intentionally. He found a small, cozy apartment, cheaper but peaceful, where every corner belonged to him and no memory was weaponized. He started therapy, not to forget Emily, but to remember himself. He went back to the gym, reconnected with old friends, learned to cook again, and played music like he used to in college. His boss noticed his renewed focus and promoted him, not because he begged for approval, but because he'd stopped tying his worth to being loved by someone else. Madison checked in sometimes, just as a friend, bringing coffee on bad days, listening without judgment, reminding him he was human and deserving of kindness. She never tried to replace Emily or fill the empty spaces. She simply helped Daniel remember that he still mattered in the world. Meanwhile, Emily spiraled. Liam disappeared from her life completely. The business idea died before it began. The lifestyle she built around manipulation collapsed with no one left to fund it. She moved into a small rented room, alone for the first time in years. Nights were the hardest. She scrolled old photos of her and Daniel, trying to remember when she stopped loving him or if she ever truly tried. The truth hit her like a punishment. Daniel was the only person who ever loved her without condition. The perfume, the secrecy, the affair, none of it brought fulfillment. She lost a man who believed in her even when she didn't deserve it. Daniel, however, didn't look back. His life didn't become perfect, but it became his. And that was enough. Heartbreak didn't destroy him. It rebuilt him that a full year passed, and Daniel's life no longer resembled the hollow world he once survived. His new apartment wasn't grand, but it loved him back, from the sunlight that warmed his mornings to the quiet that never punished him. The furniture didn't match. The paint wasn't perfect, but everything inside was chosen by him, for him. He woke up without dread, cooked without loneliness, worked without exhaustion, and slept without tears. Peace didn't come suddenly. It arrived in small victories, healed in layers, and lived in new routines. One afternoon, while sorting his mail, Daniel noticed a handwritten envelope. The moment he saw the familiar handwriting, his breath caught. Emily. His fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of a past that once shattered him. He opened it slowly, unsure whether the pain inside would feel familiar or distant. The letter wasn't dramatic. It was devastating in its simplicity. Emily wrote about the life she had now. Small, quiet, full of regret. She admitted that she had destroyed everything good in her world with her own hands, that Liam left her, that love turned to dust, and that she finally understood the value of what she had lost. "You were the only person who ever loved me without asking for anything in return," she wrote. "And I threw you away. I ruined my life, Daniel. If there's even a small chance, even 1%, to start again, please tell me." Her final sentence struck him like a memory and a goodbye at the same time. "You were the love I didn't know how to protect." Daniel sat quietly after reading it. No anger, no satisfaction, just a gentle ache, the kind that comes from scars, not wounds. Daniel folded the letter carefully, not in resentment, not in longing, but in respect for the person he used to be. He stepped onto the balcony, feeling the golden sunset brush his face. The world below moved in gentle silence, life flowing without chaos. For the first time in years, he felt whole, not because someone loved him, but because he finally learned to love himself. He whispered into the warm air, not for Emily, not for the past, but for the man who survived it. "I finally learned to love the one person I always abandoned myself." He smiled softly, not the smile of victory over someone else, but the quiet, steady smile of peace earned through pain. The sun dipped lower, the wind moved through the leaves, and the screen of life didn't fade on heartbreak. It faded on healing.